with the Giants, and is this as embarrassed as you've been about the franchise?
Honestly, I would have to say yes. Yes, it is. I kept thinking during the season that we had hit rock bottom, and then each week it got a little worse. So honestly, I'm not proud of saying this, but if I'm going to be 100% honest, I would have to say the answer is yes. There are no package deals. I mean, we want to get the general manager ideally done first, and obviously we'll talk about the candidates for head coach, but it's not going to be a package deal. I want to go through a complete process here, interview as many people as possible. I don't want to rush into anything. We've made that mistake in the past, and I want to make sure we get to see as many candidates as possible, ideally.
And, to amplify the point that Peter made last segment, as we hear from John Mara earlier in the week, they want to take their time. The problem is you've got 7 other coaching vacancies, and they're not taking their time. The Raiders are because they're still playing, but there becomes an urgency. There becomes almost like a panic, like you've got to get to the store to buy the hot Christmas toy.
No, you don't.
I'm just saying. No, I'm saying I'm saying that sense develops. That's the sense you have to resist. That scarcity mentality that prompts people to go spend whatever they have to spend to get whatever they want before someone else gets it. I mean, if there's somebody the Giants kind of like, and they're concerned that someone else is going to get them, hey, they got burned. They got burned 2 years ago, right? They didn't want to pay Matt Rule. The Panthers pounced on Matt Rule before the Giants could even get him into the building. So they resisted then, and I think they'd like to resist again. But if they find somebody they really like, you may sit there and watch him go coach someone else and be pretty damn good while you settle for someone other than the guy that you were getting interested in. I'm just saying it's hard to do because others aren't going to sit and wait, even if the Giants are inclined to do so.
So in 2020, all right, 5 days after the end of the regular season, 5 days, the New York Giants, spurned by Matt Rule, later that day hired Joe Judge. Okay, and so we're at that moment right now, today, right now. We're at the moment where 2 years ago they hired Joe Judge. And my only advice for John Mara and for Steve Tisch is if somebody gets some guy who you interviewed and you liked, either as a GM or coach, say, hey, God bless you, good luck. We are not going to be rushed. Even if we have to look at 4 or 5 more candidates, that's fine. What difference does it make? Do your due diligence, get the right guy. I bet they're really happy they rushed into Joe Judge 2 years ago. Don't you think? But, 2 other points about the Giants. I don't remember a general manager who left such a disaster in his wake as Dave Gettleman has left with the Giants. Now, Dave Gettleman did some good things in his two tenures with the New York Giants. He really did. He did, he scouted players. He did a good job, okay? But this tenure was an abject, absolute disaster. And I'll tell you why when I say that, he leaves a disaster in his wake. The Giants are one of 5 teams right now that are in negative cap condition entering the 2022 season. 5 teams. They're by far the worst team. Okay? And I just to give you an example of how bad the Giants cap situation is. 7 players. James Bradbury, Adoree Jackson, Logan Ryan, Leonard Williams, Sterling Shepard, Kenny Golladay, and Blake Martinez. Those 7 players, okay, account for 60% of the Giants' salary cap in 2022. $125 million on the cap in 2022. And look, Kenny Golladay, he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong. And I don't get overwhelmed by the fact he had 0 touchdowns this year. It was a disastrous year for the offense. But a $21.2 million cap figure for Kenny Golladay, Adoree Jackson, $15.5 million. I mean, what got into the Giants to be such desperate, profligate spenders in free agency to have these disastrous contracts, on their books right now?
Profligate. I'm concerned that when they re-air this in the UK on Sky, that may be a curse word. I'm not. It may be in the United States. I'm not quite sure what it means. Peter, they were competing with no one for Kenny Golladay. They got snookered into paying Kenny Golladay what they paid him. It reminded me last year when Dave Gettleman was doing the drunken sailor spend routine. It reminded me of Jerry Reese the year that they went out and they got, and I know I'm not going to remember all of them. Well, I think they got Janoris Jenkins, Snacks Harrison, and Olivier Vernon all in the same cycle because Jerry Reese was on the hot seat. I mean, that's what happens. GM gets on the hot seat in New York and goes out and spends to try to save his job. And it was a futile exercise, obviously, for Dave Gettleman. He's gone, and now Joe Judge is gone. And I feel like they really wanted to try to talk themselves into keeping Joe Judge. They like Joe Judge, John Mara, and his family members who have titles of influence and significance in the organization. They liked Joe Judge. And I think they wanted to hire a GM who would be fine with keeping Joe Judge. They realized, though, after a couple of days, that it was going to be almost impossible to find the right GM who would be content to keep the guy who had the 11-minute meltdown after the Week 17 loss and did the whole "we are not a clown show" thing, basically admitted to tampering the next day on a conference call, and then did the reverse flying V formation on 3rd and 9 from his own 5-yard line. I mean, how can you ever recover from that if you're Joe Judge? And I think that unlike the Texans, who I don't believe spent 4 days carefully evaluating David Culley, I really do think the Giants spent 2 days trying to see if they could talk themselves into keeping Joe Judge, and ultimately realizing there's no coming back from what you see on the screen.
Mike, I believe that, if that play was the play that meant the end of Joe Judge, you also have to look at the 11-minute speech as, to me, a major part in it. Because here's what Joe Judge did, okay? After getting beat by 26 points against a 5-win team late in the season, and after being absolutely hapless on offense, and after your special teams, you were hired as a special teams coach, has the most embarrassing special teams play in recent memory, where the kick returner waves off everybody and starts going off the field, and the ball bounces at the 2 or 3 yard line and just dies. So then you have to have a mad scramble to go recover the ball, and in the next minute, you get a safety, and the other team gets a field goal because of that. And then after that game, you stand up there and talk about what a wonderful culture you have. All I can say about culture is a 4-letter word and then culture. That's all you can say about it. Because everyone in the NFL says, oh, we want to build this great culture. Ask some of the guys who used to play for the Patriots, okay? Ask what they think about the kumbaya culture under Bill Belichick. It's not the culture. It's the game plans. It's the great coaching, and it's the quarterback. That's what it is. That's how you win. That's how you win in the NFL. You don't win by saying, oh, man, I am happy to go to work today. What a great place this is. And, stop with the culture. And you defend yourself, because that was an 11-minute speech intended for John Mara and Steve Tisch, whether he thought it was at the time or not. But that's certainly how it appeared to everyone. It's a speech saying, I should keep my job because everybody loves coming to work. It was insane. It was crazy. Who, after a 26-point loss, says, we got great culture, we're on our way? Crazy.
Bruce Allen, but that's a different story altogether. There's a theory out there that Joe Judge actually wanted to get fired, and this was part of it. Look, that's ridiculous because there's no coming back from this for him anywhere.
There's no coming back from it.
He will never be a head coach again. He better spend that $15 million wisely that he's going to get over the next 3 years, and he's already splurging on pizza and beer, which I think is actually kind of funny. Maybe that's how you come back from it. I don't know. But you can't. You're not getting a second chance. There it is. You're not getting a second chance as a head coach. Some guys do. Some guys don't. Joe Judge is not going to get a second chance as a head coach. He's just not, especially since he's a special teams coordinator. It's not like you're going to go back and become some great defensive coordinator and all of a sudden people are going to be like, hey, I think we need to give him another chance. And on that point, Peter, something that is very vexing to me, something that I don't understand as the Giants, the Bears, and the Vikings are looking for new general managers. And it's a smattering of names of people who have never been general managers. And sometimes I have to ask myself, who is that person? And then I have to go look it up. And then I still have to ask myself, who is that person? Why do you think, and I wrote something about this the other day, and I don't want to leave anyone out.
I love
always
what
hate
you
making
wrote about
lists of names.
I love this.
I always hate it because I'm sure I left someone out. But whether it's Thomas Dimitroff, who built a Super Bowl team, who drafted Matt Ryan, first order of business, and he's still the starting quarterback of the Falcons 14 years later. Jerry Reese, who won 2 Super Bowls as the general manager of the New York Giants. Rick Smith, who was responsible for some of the best Texans teams we've seen in the 20 years they've been around. Rick Spielman,
and
who's now available.
Deshaun Watson.
Exactly. Rick Spielman, who's available after 16 years with the Vikings. Scott Pioli, we forget about the Executive of the Year awards that he won with the Patriots. I know his time with the Chiefs was far from ideal, but you've got former general managers out there, and there are others who were viable and successful. And yes, just like coaches, it hits the end of the road. But good coaches get a second act. Why don't general managers who were on the pass side of pass fail? No, and I'm not saying get hired. I'm saying why do their names not even come up?
I can't answer it, Mike. I think it has to do with the fact that almost every guy who you just mentioned, John Dorsey too, almost every guy you just mentioned is, even though they've got some good things to their credit, they've also got some negatives to their credit. And, so when they get hired, they're going to have to stand in front of a room and they're going to have to say, okay, here's the way we're going to do it. Well, what about when you were in franchise X and this happened and that happened and all this, and you didn't get this done and all that other stuff. Whereas you hire one of these fresh-faced guys who people don't know.
They've got no baggage. They got no scars.
It's a honeymoon period. And I also think the other factor, Mike, when you wrote this, I started thinking about it, and that's the first thing I thought of. The second thing I thought of? Brandon Staley. You said, what do you mean, Brandon Staley? Openness to new ideas and doing things differently and having, Mike, there are teams in the NFL right now that have 8, 10, 12 employees in analytics. I'd call it analytics, but whatever they're called, football strategy, whatever it is, openness to that. And a lot of guys who you mentioned, and I don't know all of them, and I have no idea what Rick Spielman thought of analytics, but I do know that, for instance, in Cleveland, John Dorsey and Paul DePodesta clashed over some of that stuff. So automatically, John Dorsey is going to have to walk into an interview and tell people, I embrace analytics. And he's going to have to prove it to somebody. So I do think there's that part of it. Does somebody who has been around the game for 20 or 25 years, and in 1995, analytics didn't exist, and does somebody who cut his teeth in the NFL in a pre-strategic time in the NFL, are they going to be open to that? And are they going to embrace it? And are they going to use it?
Well, look, I understand why a John Dorsey would have difficult moments of an interview. And I think any coach or GM who's been with a team and has been fired is going to have awkward moments that need to be explained, whereas somebody who's never done it before is not dragged down by that. I still don't understand why there isn't at least the conversation, at least just part of the due diligence. How can you do your due diligence if you're only looking at people who have never done the job before and you're not considering people who have done the job to a certain degree of success, especially for a team like the Vikings, frankly, where it's a lot like Stephen Ross. The Wilfs don't live in Minnesota. They need a strong presence to be in charge of the football operation. And somebody who's been there and done that and done it well would at least be somebody I think to consider. I'm not saying hire. I'm just saying consider as you figure out what's best for your franchise.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.